She knocked on the wrong door at the right moment, and Daniel Carr almost missed it. He was under the sink when he heard it, 3 knocks, the kind that land like a statement, not a question. He pulled himself out with grease on his knuckles and a wrench in his hand, and when he opened the door, the afternoon light hit the woman standing there in a way that made him squint. She was wearing a coat that belonged to a different town than this one. Navy blue, fitted with buttons that actually matched. Her shoes were clean. Everything about her was clean, the kind of clean that takes money and maintenance, and it was the kind of thing you noticed immediately in Alderton, where the sidewalks were cracked and the storefronts had been half empty for going on a decade. She looked at the wrench in his hand. He looked at the folder tucked against her chest. Neither of them said anything for one full beat. "Daniel Carr," she said. "Depends on what you need," he said. That was not a charming answer. He knew it the second it left his mouth. She did not smile, but something in her expression adjusted slightly, the way a person does when they decide to be patient with someone who is being unnecessarily guarded. "My name is Marisol Vane," she said. "I need about 20 minutes of your time. I have a proposal." He stepped back from the door, old instinct. In his former life, proposals meant contracts, estimates, service agreements. The kind of paperwork that came from the industrial park on Route 9 when a facilities manager wanted a quote on repairing their equipment. He had not had one of those in 4 months, and the shop account was sitting at a number that made his jaw tight every time he looked at it. "Come in," he said. She came in. She looked at the house the way a person looks at something they have already decided they will not judge. The living room had a couch with a throw blanket that his daughter Lily had claimed entirely. There were crayon drawings on the refrigerator visible through the kitchen doorway. The radio on the counter was playing something low and unintelligible. A pair of small rain boots stood by the door, yellow, with frog eyes on the toes. Marisol sat down at the kitchen table when he gestured toward it. She placed the folder flat in front of her and put both hands on top of it, one over the other. He sat across from her. He set the wrench on the counter because it occurred to him that holding it during whatever this was would look odd. He did not wash his hands, and he was aware of the grease. "You worked with my father," she said, 11 years ago. His name is Gerald Vane. He owned the distribution warehouse on the east side of Alderton. Daniel thought back. The name arrived slowly, like something dredged from the bottom of a lake. The cold storage facility, off Miller Road. "Yes. I did about 8 months of refrigeration work there, compressors mostly." He paused. "How is he?" Her hands pressed a little harder on the folder. "He is not well," she said. "He has been unwell for a while now." There was something in the way she said it that closed the subject like a door being quietly shut. He did not push. "What is the proposal?" he said. She opened the folder. There were 2 pages inside. They were typed, not handwritten, and that detail alone made something in the back of his neck go cold. Typed documents that arrived in folders at kitchen tables were not refrigeration contracts. He looked at the top line. He read it twice. He looked up at her. "You are serious," he said. "I am," she said. The word marriage was sitting there in plain black text, formal, clinical, like a term in a lease agreement. She kept her eyes level on him. She was not embarrassed. She was not apologetic. She was the most composed person who had ever sat at his kitchen table, and she was proposing marriage the way someone proposes a business arrangement, because that was exactly what she was doing. "I need you to hear the full terms before you say anything," she said. He said nothing. She talked. The proposal was this: a legal marriage entered into willingly by both parties, lasting a minimum of 1 year. She would contribute financially to his household during the duration. She was specific about the number, and the number was not small. At the end of the term, they would divorce cleanly. No claims, no disputes. There was a contract ready, she said. A lawyer had already drafted it. He stared at the second page. There was a section at the bottom with 2 lines for signatures. "What do you need from a marriage?" he said. "What is this solving for you?" She folded her hands on the table again. "That is a fair question," she said, "and I will answer it, but I need to know one thing first." He waited. "Is your daughter in this house right now?" He looked toward the hallway. Lily was at school, would be home in 2 hours. "No," he said. "Then I can be direct." She took a breath that was small and controlled. There is someone in my family who will challenge my father's estate unless I am married. The challenge has a filing deadline. The deadline is in 6 weeks. If the challenge succeeds, my father loses his home. He loses the only thing left that is his. Silence. The radio kept playing. The person making the challenge, Daniel said, they know you are not married. They do. And a marriage in the next 6 weeks would legally block them. With the right documentation and the right public record, yes. He put his hand flat on the table, near the folder but not on it. He looked at the pages. He looked at the signature lines. Why me? He said. She looked at him for a long moment before she answered. Because you are known in this town, she said. Because you have no connection to my family's business. Because you have a reputation for being honest, and that matters in court if it ever came to that. And because a mutual contact told me you were a man who understood difficult situations. Who? She said a name. It landed in his chest like a coin dropped into an empty well. The name belonged to his late wife's best friend, a woman named Carol Sims, who had moved to the coast 2 years ago and who sent Lily a birthday card every year without fail. He had not spoken to Carol in 8 months. He had not spoken to anyone in a long time about anything real. He stood up from the table, not because he was leaving, just because sitting still had become impossible. He walked to the counter, picked up the wrench, set it back down. He looked out the window at the backyard, at the old tire swing that had not moved since the last storm knotted the rope around the branch. His wife had hung that swing. He turned back around. 6 weeks, he said. Yes. 1 year total. Yes. And Lily, he stopped. She would know none of this. Marisol's expression shifted then, just slightly, just enough. That is your decision entirely. I would follow your lead on what you tell your daughter. He looked at the 2 signature lines at the bottom of the second page. He looked at her face. She was sitting absolutely still, with both hands flat on the table, watching him with the kind of patience that was not calm. He could see now that it was the opposite of calm. She had pulled herself into stillness the way you pull a coat tight in the wind, because the stillness was all she had at the moment. She was terrified, and she was not going to say so. He respected that more than he could explain. I am not signing anything today, he said. I am not asking you to. I need 24 hours. I can give you 48. He walked back to the table. He picked up the folder, both pages inside, and he held it out to her. She looked at it, then she looked at him. Keep it, she said. Read it again tonight when it is quiet. There is a phone number on the back of the second page. She stood up. She was taller than he remembered from the doorway. Or maybe he was just more aware of her now than he had been 3 minutes ago. She picked up her bag from the floor beside the chair, where she had set it without him noticing. One more thing, she said. Go ahead. I know what happened to your wife, she said. Carol told me. I am not asking you to pretend this is something it is not. I am asking for a business agreement between 2 people who both need something, nothing beyond that. He nodded once. She walked to the door. She let herself out. He stood in his kitchen for a long time after the sound of her car leaving had fully faded. The radio was still playing. He had no idea what the song was. The folder was on the table and the signature lines were facing up, and outside the tire swing was completely still. Lily would be home in 2 hours. He washed his hands. He sat back down. He read every word of both pages 3 times. When Lily came through the door at 3:47 with paint on her sleeve and a drawing of a horse that she insisted looked like a horse, he folded the pages back into the folder and slid it under a pile of bills on the counter. She dropped her bag, climbed onto the counter to reach the cabinet, and announced that she wanted crackers and that her teacher had said elephants could recognize themselves in mirrors. Can we, she asked. Can we what? Recognize ourselves. He looked at her. She was 7. She had her mother's nose and his inability to let a question sit without poking it. Most days, he said. She seemed satisfied with that. She took her crackers and disappeared into the living room. He stood at the counter. The folder sat under the bills. He did not touch it again that night. But he did not sleep either. The next morning came gray and close, the kind of sky that could not make up its mind. Daniel was at the shop by 7. He ran the engine on a neighbor's truck that had been stuttering at cold starts, and while it warmed up in the lot, he stood with a coffee he had made badly and thought about Marisol Vane. He thought about the way she had said his daughter's name. She had not said Lily's name. She had said your daughter, and she had said it carefully, as though the child were something she did not have the right to name yet. He thought about the signature lines. He thought about Gerald Vane and the cold storage facility and 8 months of compressor work in a building that smelled like frost and cardboard. Gerald had been a direct man, paid on time, asked no unnecessary questions, always had a thermos of coffee ready at 8 in the morning. A good man to work for. His daughter had his eyes. Daniel had not noticed that yesterday. He was noticing it now. By noon, he had made a decision. He called the number on the back of the second page. She answered on the second ring. Daniel Carr, he said. Yes, she said. She had been expecting him. I have questions, he said. Ask them. He asked 6. She answered all 6 without hesitation, without deflection, without softening a single edge. She was precise. She was honest in the way that felt slightly uncomfortable to receive, the way honesty sometimes does when you are not used to it. By the end of the call, he had one question left. If I say no, he said, what do you do? She was quiet for a moment, just a moment. I keep looking, she said. There are other options, they are worse options. But they exist. He thought about that. He thought about what kind of options are worse than asking a stranger to sign a marriage contract at a kitchen table. I will call you tomorrow morning, he said. All right, she said. He hung up. He went back to the truck. The engine had evened out. The stuttering was gone. He listened to it run clean and steady for a full minute before he went back inside. Tomorrow morning. He would call tomorrow morning. He told himself that 3 more times before he believed it. The call came. Not from him. From the school. Lily had fallen on the playground and hit her chin on the edge of the jungle gym and needed 2 stitches, and was currently sitting in the nurse's office asking whether stitches could be done in a color other than clear. He locked the shop. He drove to the school. He sat next to his daughter in a plastic chair while the school nurse held a piece of gauze against her chin, and Lily narrated the fall with the kind of dramatic precision that suggested she had already decided this story would be worth telling for years. And then, Lily said, I let go on purpose because I wanted to see if I would fly. Did you? Daniel said. A little, she said, before the not flying part. He held her hand on the way to the urgent care clinic. She asked if she could name her stitches. He said she could name them whatever she wanted. She chose the names of the 4 seasons, assigned in a row, and explained that she would introduce them to her friends at school. She was 7. She had her mother's nose. He sat in the waiting room while they closed the cut, and he looked at the plain white wall across from him, and he thought about a folder under a pile of bills on a kitchen counter. He thought about what 48 hours of thinking actually changes. He's thought about nothing for a while. Lily came out with a small bandage and an enormous sense of dignity. Did it hurt? He said. It hurt the regular amount, she said. He almost smiled at that. He drove her home. He made dinner. He watched her fall asleep on the couch with the blanket pulled up to her bandaged chin. He went to the counter. He moved the bills. He picked up the folder. He stood there in the quiet kitchen with the radio off for once, and he read the pages one more time. He thought about Marisol sitting across from him with her hands flat on the table, pulling herself into stillness because it was all she had. He thought about her saying nothing beyond that. He thought about his daughter asking, can we recognize ourselves? He set the folder down. He picked up his phone. He typed a message instead of calling because the hour was late and because some things are better said in writing when you are not sure how your voice will land. The message said, I have more questions, but I am leaning toward yes. Let us meet again this week. He set the phone face down on the counter. He went and sat on the end of the couch near Lily's feet. The house was quiet. Outside, the tire swing moved once in a wind he could not feel from inside, turned slowly in a half circle, and stopped. He watched it through the window until he could not keep his eyes open. 3 days passed before she knocked again. This time he heard it coming. He was not under the sink. He was at the kitchen table with coffee and the folder open in front of him, and when the knock came, 3 clean beats, the same as before, he got up and opened the door without the wrench. She stood in a different coat, darker. The folder she carried this time was thicker. "You came back," he said. "You said to meet this week," she said. He stepped back from the door. She came in. They sat at the table. And this time, neither of them pretended the conversation was about anything other than exactly what it was. The second meeting lasted 2 hours. He asked his remaining questions. She answered them. At some point, she asked him a question, the first one she had asked him directly, and it was this: "What do you need from this?" He was quiet for a moment. He said stability for 1 year, enough to catch up. She nodded. She wrote something on the edge of the second page. He looked at it. He looked at the signature lines. He picked up the pen she slid across the table. His hand was steady. He signed. She signed below him. The kitchen was very quiet. She folded both pages back into the folder with the careful movements of someone who has been waiting a long time for a specific moment and is now making sure they do not rush through it. She looked up. He looked at her. 6 weeks, he said. Yes, she said. Neither of them said anything else. The radio came on by itself, the way it sometimes did when the timer hit its reset. A song neither of them knew filled the kitchen, low and unintelligible, the same as the day she first arrived. He thought that was either a very good sign or a very bad one. He had not yet decided which. The filing was quiet. A courthouse on a Wednesday morning, a clerk who did not look up from his screen, 2 witnesses that Marisol had arranged, a woman named Claire from her lawyer's office, and a man named Pete who appeared to work in the building and had been asked at the last minute to sign something. Daniel wore the better of his 2 jackets. It was not a remarkable jacket. Marisol wore gray. She had a single clip in her hair. The ceremony, if it could be called that, lasted 11 minutes. Lily was told her father had a business partnership that would involve some changes for a year. She looked at him with the kind of careful attention that 7-year-olds deploy when they know an adult is telling a partial truth, and then she asked if the changes would affect the location of her frog boots. He said no. She said okay. She went back to her drawing. He stood in the hallway outside her room for a long time after that. The folder was in the kitchen drawer now, under the takeout menus, next to the batteries that may or may not be dead. Signed, filed, done. 1 year. He had absolutely no idea what came next. Neither did she. But 6 weeks later, when the estate challenge was filed and immediately blocked by documentation that was clean and thorough and entirely legal, Gerald Vane's name stayed on the deed to the house he had lived in for 31 years. Marisol called Daniel from outside the courthouse. He was in the shop under a different truck. It held, she said. He pulled himself out, sat on the concrete floor, looked at the ceiling. Good, he said. A pause. Thank you, she said. It was the quietest he had heard her voice. He said nothing for a moment. Is your father all right? He said. He does not know any of this happened, she said. I wanted it that way. He thought about a man who did not know his daughter had gone to a stranger's kitchen table to protect what was his. He thought about what that kind of love looked like from the outside. Okay, he said. She said goodbye. He sat on the concrete floor of the shop for another minute after she hung up. The truck above him ticked as the engine cooled. The radio was on. It was playing something he did not recognize. He got up. He went back to work. 2 months into the arrangement, Marisol began spending 2 evenings a week at the house on account of appearances, because the person who had filed the estate challenge had hired someone to look into the marriage. Marisol had been told this by her lawyer, whose name was Stuart, and Stuart had used the phrase verify the relationship with the blankness of a man who had said that phrase many times before. So she came on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She sat at the kitchen table or on the couch or on the back step when the evening was warm enough, and Daniel moved around his house and his daughter moved around the house, and Marisol existed in the periphery of their life like a chair that had always been there, but that no one had named yet. Lily noticed her. Of course Lily noticed her. Lily noticed everything. The first Tuesday, she stood in the kitchen doorway and watched Marisol eat a bowl of soup that Daniel had made too much of and said, with the directness of someone who has not yet learned that directness is considered rude, "Do you know how to braid?" Marisol looked at her. "Hairs," Lily clarified. "Do you know how to braid hair?" "I do," Marisol said. Lily considered this. "Okay," she said, and she went back to the living room. On Thursday, she arrived in the kitchen 10 minutes after Marisol sat down, carrying a brush and 3 rubber bands. She put them on the table in front of Marisol. She sat down in the chair next to her and turned so that her back was facing her. Marisol looked at the brush. She looked at Daniel, who was at the counter pretending to be busy. He shrugged with one shoulder. She picked up the brush. She started braiding. Lily sat perfectly still, which was not her usual mode of existing in the world, and she said nothing for the full 4 minutes it took, which was also not her usual mode. When Marisol finished and tied the end, Lily stood up, felt the braid with both hands, and said, "That is good." Then she picked up the brush and the extra rubber bands and left the kitchen. Daniel did not look at Marisol. Marisol did not look at him. She picked up her cup of tea. He went back to what he had been pretending to do. Outside, the tire swing moved in the evening wind. Neither of them mentioned the braid again. But Thursday became the night Lily sometimes had her hair done. And Tuesday became the night Marisol brought a container of something she had made, because she had started cooking again for the first time in a while, and it was easier to cook for 3 than to figure out portions for 1. Daniel ate whatever she brought without complaint. He was a man who understood that some things do not need to be named to be real. He had learned that the hard way, and he was still learning it, and he did not know yet what he was learning now. But the tire swing turned in the evening wind. And the kitchen was warm. And somewhere under the takeout menus, next to the possibly dead batteries, a signed contract sat in a drawer that no one opened anymore. 1 year. They were 8 weeks in. Gerald Vane called on a Sunday in the 3rd month. Marisol had left her phone on the kitchen table when she stepped out to the backyard with Lily, who had decided that the dead rose bush near the fence needed to be given a proper name and funeral, which apparently required a witness. The phone rang twice before Daniel saw the name on the screen. He picked it up without thinking. "Hello," he said. Silence. Then, "Who is this?" The voice was older, careful, the voice of a man who had learned to be precise with his words because imprecision had cost him things. "Daniel Carr," he said, "Marisol's husband." Another silence, longer. "Her husband," Gerald said. "Yes, sir." A long exhale. "I did not know she had gotten married." "It was quiet," Daniel said. "She is in the backyard." "Would you like me to get her?" "No," Gerald said, "not yet." A pause. "You worked on my refrigeration units years ago." Daniel sat down. "I did 8 months. You always had coffee ready at 8. Gerald made a sound that was almost a laugh. "I remember you. You fixed the east compressor on a Sunday because you knew we could not lose product over a weekend." "The bearings were going," Daniel said. "It was not a difficult call." "It was a good call," Gerald said. "I appreciated it." They were quiet for a moment, 2 men who did not know each other well enough for the conversation they were having, and both of them aware of it. "Is she all right?" Gerald said finally. "My daughter." Daniel looked out the window. Marisol was crouched next to Lily near the fence. Lily was arranging small stones in a circle around the rose bush. Marisol was watching her with her arms resting on her knees, and she had her head slightly tilted, and she was almost smiling. He had not seen her almost smile before. She is all right, he said. She works hard. She worries about you. She worries about everything, Gerald said. She has done that since she was 8 years old. Daniel said nothing. You have a daughter, Gerald said. Lily, she is 7. 7 is a serious age, Gerald said. Marisol at 7 told me she was going to be an architect. She built a city out of cardboard boxes in the garage. It took up half the space. A pause. What does Lily want to be? Daniel looked at the window again. Lily was now apparently giving a speech over the rose bush. Marisol was listening with the seriousness the moment seemed to require. Different things every week, Daniel said. Last week it was a geologist. Before that, a professional tire swing operator. Gerald laughed, a real one this time, quiet but real. That is a good age, he said. Yes, Daniel said, it is. The back door opened. Marisol stepped in, saw Daniel at the table with her phone at his ear, and went very still. He held the phone out. She looked at the screen. Something moved across her face that she did not bother trying to hide, because there was no time to hide it. She took the phone. She walked back to the doorway. Dad, she said. Daniel got up from the table. He went to the counter. He put the kettle on and found 2 mugs and did not listen to the conversation, which was happening quietly behind him in a voice he had not heard her use before, lower and softer, the voice underneath the composed one. Lily came in from outside with dirt on her knees and a look of solemn completion. We gave it a good service, she announced. Good, Daniel said. Its name was Harold. Harold was lucky to have you. She nodded. She accepted a biscuit from the tin on the counter and went to the living room. Behind Daniel, Marisol finished the call. He turned around. Her eyes were dry, she had made sure of that, but the hand holding the phone was pressing it a little harder than necessary. He turned back to the counter. He poured hot water into both mugs. He slid one toward her end of the table without looking at her. She sat down. She wrapped both hands around the mug. He sat across from her with his own. The kitchen was quiet. The radio was off. Outside, Lily could be heard explaining something to the couch. After a while, Marisol said, he sounded good. He did, Daniel said. She looked at the mug. He liked you, she said. Daniel said nothing. He does not like many people quickly, she said. He looked at her across the table, at the cup in her hands, at the folder that was not on the table anymore because it was in a drawer under the takeout menus, and neither of them was thinking about it right now, or maybe both of them were, in the way you think about something you have agreed not to name. He asked if you were all right, Daniel said. She looked up. I told him yes, he said. She held his eyes for a moment that was neither short nor long. Then she looked back at the mug. Thank you, she said. The kettle ticked as it cooled. Outside, Lily had moved from explaining something to the couch to explaining something to the frog boots by the door. Harold had been given his service. The rose bush was officially named. And in the kitchen, 2 people who had signed a contract in a courthouse on a Wednesday morning sat across from each other with warm mugs and said nothing else, and the nothing was its own kind of language, and neither of them tried to translate it. The investigation into the marriage came and went like a cold front. A man in a gray sedan sat outside the house twice, once on a Tuesday evening when Marisol's car was in the driveway and the kitchen light was on, once on a Thursday when Lily had loudly announced from the front window that there was a man parked outside who was eating a sandwich and not sharing it with anyone, which she considered suspicious on 2 counts. Marisol's lawyer, Stuart, reported back that the investigator had found nothing irregular. The marriage was legal, documented, and consistent in its visible patterns. The estate challenge had been fully dismissed. The dismissal was final. Gerald's house was safe. Marisol told Daniel this on a Thursday evening in month 4 in the kitchen, while Lily was in the bath and the frog boots stood by the door and the radio played something low. She said it plainly, no ceremony, no dramatic pause. He said, that is good. She said, yes. They were quiet. Then she said we could file now if you wanted, for the divorce. The legal minimum has certain flexibilities. Stuart thinks we have enough on record. He looked at his coffee. She was looking at the table. I want to be clear, she said, that I am not asking you to. I am telling you the option exists. He nodded. She folded her hands. The bath down the hall made a splash. Lily said something to a rubber duck. The rubber duck presumably said nothing back. I am not in a hurry, he said. She looked up. Neither am I, she said, and then after a beat, if that is all right. It was so quiet that he could hear the radio breathing. That is all right, he said. She nodded once. He nodded once. Lily appeared in the doorway in her pajamas with damp hair and a rubber duck held at arm's length. His name is Gerald, she announced. Marisol's head turned. Lily held the duck up. I named him today, Gerald. Marisol's mouth opened just slightly. That is, she said, a very good name. Lily seemed satisfied. She held Gerald the duck to her chest and went back down the hall. Marisol turned back to the table. Her hands were still folded. But something in her face had opened, just slightly, the way a window does when someone finally reaches up and turns the latch. Daniel looked at the radio. He did not look back at her, but he heard her take a breath that was longer and slower than the ones before it, and it sounded like the first easy breath she had taken in a very long time. The radio played on. The bath down the hall was quiet now, and the kitchen held them both, the way kitchens do when they have had enough time to figure out what a person needs. Month 5 arrived without announcement. There was no day that Daniel looked at the calendar and thought, we are in month 5 now. It arrived the way seasons do, in small shifts. The light changed. The air lost its warmth by early evening. Lily started wearing the red coat instead of the yellow one. Marisol began bringing a scarf when she came on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She left it on the hook by the door one Thursday without meaning to, and when she came back the following Tuesday and saw it hanging there, she looked at it for a moment and then said nothing and sat down. It stayed on the hook. Nobody moved it. Daniel noticed it every time he walked past it. He was not sure what he felt about that. He was not sure he was ready to find out. There was a version of himself that cataloged things carefully before naming them, a version that had been running the shop for 2 years, raising Lily for 2 years, existing at a measured distance from anything that required more of him than he was sure he had. That version of himself was starting to feel like a coat that no longer fit quite right. He had not told anyone that. He was not sure he would. But the scarf stayed on the hook. And on a Tuesday in the 5th month, while Lily was asleep and the house was quiet, Marisol said, without looking up from the book she had started keeping in her bag for these evenings, "My father wants to meet you, properly." Daniel looked up from the table. "He knows about Lily," she said. "He would like to meet her too, if that is all right." The question was careful. Everything about the way she asked it was careful, the way a person asks when they are aware that they are asking for more than the words are saying. He thought about a man with a thermos of coffee at 8 in the morning. He thought about a voice on a phone saying, "That is a good age." He thought about Lily at 7 telling him she wanted to see if she would fly. "That is all right," he said. She nodded. She turned a page. He went back to the papers in front of him. Outside, the wind moved the tire swing. Neither of them said anything else that evening. But when she left at 9:30, she took her book. She left the scarf. They drove to see Gerald on a Saturday in the 6th month. Marisol drove. Lily sat in the back and asked questions for 40 minutes about where they were going and what the town was called and whether the man they were visiting had any animals and whether his house had stairs. Gerald's house had stairs. It also had a garden that had been carefully maintained through his illness by a neighbor named Owen who came twice a week, and a kitchen that smelled like the kind of food that takes most of a day to make, and a dog. The dog was old and slow, and named something that Marisol had to spell out twice before Lily understood it was a name and not an instruction. "Booker," Lily said. The dog looked at her. She looked at the dog. She sat down on the floor next to him. That was the last they heard from Lily for 20 minutes. Gerald stood in the kitchen doorway. He was thinner than Daniel remembered and slower in his movements, but his eyes were the same as his daughter's, clear and direct and careful. He shook Daniel's hand. He looked at him for a moment. "You look the same," Gerald said. "It has only been 11 years, Daniel said. Gerald almost smiled. 11 years is not nothing. "No," Daniel said, "it is not." They sat in the living room. Marisol made tea. Booker moved from Lily's lap to the rug by the window. Lily fell asleep on the rug next to him with her hand on his back, which seemed to please everyone. Gerald and Daniel talked for 2 hours. They talked about the mill town, about the cold storage facility, about refrigeration engineering, which Gerald knew more about than most people would expect, about the estate briefly, carefully, in the way men speak about things that nearly went badly but did not. At one point Gerald said, very quietly, while Marisol was in the kitchen, "She did not tell me." Daniel said nothing. "Whatever she did to protect this house," Gerald said, "she did not tell me." He looked at his hands. "I am not sure if that makes me proud of her or breaks my heart." "Both," Daniel said. Gerald looked at him. "Both," he agreed. Lily woke up from the rug, looked around to confirm where she was, and immediately asked Booker if he wanted to see the rose bush funeral she had given Harold. Booker, being a dog, was willing. Gerald watched them through the window. His daughter at the garden gate and his granddaughter, not his granddaughter but a child who might as well be, and a dog who was too old for this much activity but entirely committed to it. He did not say anything. Neither did Daniel. They drank their tea. The afternoon light came through the window at an angle that turned everything in the room the color of something ending or beginning, and it was impossible to tell which from the inside. The agreement had said 1 year. They were 8 months in when Daniel came home one evening to find Marisol at the kitchen table with the drawer open in front of her, the drawer with the takeout menus and the possibly dead batteries. She had not taken the folder out, but the drawer was open. He set his keys on the counter. "Stuart called," she said. "He waited." He said that from a legal standpoint, we have cleared every requirement. We have more than enough record. We could file next week if we wanted. She looked at the open drawer. He said to think about what we want to do. He pulled out the chair across from her. He sat down. "What do you want to do?" he said. She looked up at him. She did not have her hands folded on the table. They were in her lap. She looked for the first time since the day she arrived in the coat that belonged to a different town, like someone who did not know the answer to a question she was being asked. He understood that feeling exactly. "I do not know," she said. He nodded. "Neither do I," he said. The drawer was still open. The radio was off. Down the hall, Lily was in her room. They could hear her quietly narrating something, a story she was telling herself, or possibly to Gerald the duck, or possibly to the 4 stitches she had named after seasons, 2 of which had long since dissolved but which she maintained were still spiritually present. Marisol looked at the drawer. He looked at her. "Close it," he said. She looked at him. "The drawer," he said. "Close it." She reached out and slid the drawer shut. The kitchen was very quiet. "We have 4 more months on the agreement," he said. "Yes," she said. "We can decide at the end of 4 months," he said. She held his eyes. "Or we can decide now," she said. He said nothing. She said nothing. The drawer was closed. The contract was inside it. And the scarf was on the hook by the door, and it had been there long enough now that Daniel could not remember what the hook had looked like before it arrived. "There is a pot of water on the stove," he said. "I was going to make pasta." She looked at him. "I can help," she said. He stood up. "You can set the table," he said. She stood up. She got 3 bowls from the cabinet she had learned 4 months ago, without asking, without being shown. He filled the pot. Down the hall, Lily's narration continued. The stove clicked. The water began to heat. Nobody filed anything that week. or the week after, or the month after. The drawer stayed shut. Marisol kept coming on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then on Saturdays. And then one Sunday when it rained, she arrived because Lily had called her on Daniel's phone and said that Harold the Rosebush was being rained on and could use some company. And by the time the rain stopped, dinner had been made and eaten, and the evening had folded into itself the way evenings do when no one is watching the clock. She did not leave that Sunday until 9:45. The scarf was on the hook. The drawer was closed. And outside, the tire swing moved slowly in the wind after the rain, turning once in each direction. The rope no longer knotted around the branch the way it had been for 2 years. Someone had untied it. He had not noticed when. But it moved the way it was meant to move now, easy and wide, the way something moves when it has finally been let go of the thing that was holding it in one place. The 1-year mark arrived on a Wednesday morning. He woke up, made coffee, stood at the counter. Lily was still asleep. The house was quiet. He looked at the drawer. He did not open it. He drank his coffee. At 8:15, his phone lit up on the counter. A message from Marisol. It said it has been a year. He looked at it. He typed back, "I know. 3 minutes." Then her message, "What do you want to do?" He looked at the window. The tire swing was still. The morning was gray but clearing. He thought about a woman who had arrived at his door in a coat that belonged to a different town, with a folder pressed against her chest like a shield, proposing something he had not expected and could not have prepared for. He thought about a kitchen table and 2 signature lines. He thought about a scarf on a hook. He thought about his daughter naming a rubber duck Gerald. He thought about not being in a hurry. He thought about 4 months turning into 12 without anyone deciding to stop. He put his phone down. He opened the drawer. He took out the folder. He carried it to the table, sat down, and opened it. He looked at the 2 signature lines at the bottom of the second page. He looked at them for a long time. Then he got up, went to the counter, found a pen, and wrote something at the bottom of the second page, below the signatures, in the margin where there was still white space. He took a photo of it. He sent the photo to Marisol. Then he put the folder back in the drawer, closed it, and poured himself a second cup of coffee. His phone lit up. Her message said, "Yes." 1 word. He read it twice. He set the phone down. He stood at the counter and looked out the window at the tire swing. At 8:09, Lily appeared in the kitchen in her pajamas, with damp hair from sleeping on it wrong and a very serious expression. "It is Wednesday," she said. "It is," he said. "Wednesdays are hard," she said. "Sometimes," he said. She climbed onto the counter to reach the cabinet. She got the crackers. She looked at him while she held the tin. "Is Marisol coming today?" she said. He thought about the message. He thought about the word in the margin of the second page. He thought about what the scarf on the hook meant now, and what the closed drawer meant, and what a year of Tuesdays and Thursdays and rainy Sundays had quietly, without anyone naming it, turned into. "Yes," he said, "she is coming today." Lily considered this. "Good," she said. She took her crackers and went to the living room. He stood at the counter with his coffee. The tire swing moved in the morning wind. Clear and easy and wide. The way it was always meant to.